I'm here with Swani, recently retired coach and former analyst of G2. It was quite the ride for you, but how's retirement been treating you, man?
It's honestly really good. I can finally plan my days the way I want and don't always have to take care of other people, and also can have finally a proper routine with my girlfriend, which was not possible at all during the professional career.
There's a lot of traveling for you as well. You said that was really burning you out.
Yeah, it was over 180 days, I think, we traveled last year, and for a lot of people it sounds really nice, but it's honestly just you go from hotel to hotel, you have maybe maximum 1 day where you can actually see things. But it's obviously really nice and privileged to have it, but now I feel like I'm at an age where I want to settle down and discover new things.
I want to go back to a time before you really had that, when you were first starting out, I guess. It's been almost a decade, really. You've been working in the industry for a while. You got your start with alternate attacks as an analyst, but going way back then, can you tell me about kind of getting into that role and what encouraged you to do that?
Honestly, it started very, very way back with 99 Damage, like the German coverage scene of Counter-Strike, where I worked for free and just did like coverage for them, basically what HLTV did, but we always had to insert every score manually, so we were like tickering round by round, which was quite fun. And through this work I got to know Crispy a lot, who was in-game leader and captain of Atex back in the time. And one day he just asked me if I wouldn't want to help him out. I think it was ESWC in 2016. And yeah, then I just said, yeah, of course, why not? And I had no clue, like it was never my intention to even become an analyst or a coach. And I just said, yeah, why not? Fuck it, let's go.
What was your background like before you got into that analyst work? Like what made you a candidate for the role for him?
Honestly, I don't know, like nothing. I was never a professional player. I was just playing with him. I worked for 99 Damage, and I think there would have been 20 better candidates than me, but we were just good friends, and we always talked about the game a lot, and I think he saw that I might have a good eye for the game, and he just gave me a shot, because back in the day I think no team really even had an analyst. They were like one of the first teams that got help from like another guy outside of a coach. And yeah, they didn't even have a main coach, so it was basically me helping them and having a different pair of eyes to help them.
It was a very different game back then too, compared to how it's played now. What was the initial work like for you?
Honestly, it was just a lot of what he wanted me to do. As I said, I didn't play professionally. I didn't have any background playing professionally, so I had to learn from scratch, and I just did a lot of stuff that he wanted me to do. Like he wanted me to only focus on the opponent so he could focus on attacks, and then I was just there to create videos, to create Google Docs. I was like literally spamming Google Docs, and I obviously did way too much input for players that I would know nowadays. It was like I almost wrote a book for them always, which they obviously cannot read and cannot remember at all, but it was just learning by doing, and I'm also really thankful that the players and everyone had like patience to give a shot to a new guy, because Atex was always very ambitious, especially in the German scene, and it's not like starting in a tier 3 team or something. It was always very ambitious, and very thankful for what they did for me.
You made a really big jump up after that period though, because you went straight to Liquid. That kind of jump into an organization of Liquid's caliber, can you tell me about joining that team and what that process is like for you? Did the offer come as a surprise, or what was the kind of trajectory for you like around then?
I think it was also a lot of luck involved, because Liquid was just posting on Twitter, we are looking for an analyst back then, and you had to analyze games from them, and then there were like several rounds. There were like 4 rounds. The first one was just to analyze a game, and then it always got more specific. Then it got back to analyze our players, analyze what we could do better. And I think they were just very happy, because round by round I got through pretty fast. At least they were answering really, really fast. And then it was just me, and back in the times it was Mix as well, the Just Mix guy from NA, and in the end I got a job, and I guess there's just a lot of luck involved because they could have literally picked one of the other guys. There were probably like 50, 60 applicants, I would say, and again, a lot of luck and being there at the right time.
And back then it was you just working from home, so it didn't mean that you had to travel to NA or anything to work with the team, right?
No, not at all. They had the facility in the Netherlands still, where I was once, and then also when they were in Europe, like during Cologne, I was with them, but it was really 99% remote because I was also studying at the time, so I couldn't have gone overseas because my dad always said, make sure to have like a backup plan, and if you have your studies and your backup plan, you can do whatever you want and I will support you, but please make sure to have something properly.
I mean, probably will come in useful now that you're out of the esports scene as well. That Liquid lineup, though, I think that was the one with Stanislaw and JDM, Twist,
exactly,
Nitro, and Elige. Can you tell me what it was like working with them back then? Because this is before the titles had really come to Liquid, and they were still kind of known as the team as a bit of chokers. When they would make an occasional deep run, they would usually not be able to close it out. So what was it like back then with working with them for you?
From what I can remember, honestly, I was working a lot with Zews, who was coach back then. And I was working a lot closely with him, and also with Nitro, who was the IGL, who I still have contact with now, and we write occasionally. But it was, again, a lot focused on what Zeus wanted from me, and he was picking a lot of the stuff and using it for presentations, but it wasn't too hands-on with the players, so I didn't really have too much contact. I only know from sitting in scrims and stuff that they were like pretty good at listening also to feedback that I had. They weren't like arrogant at all, what I experienced from some players, because if you come in as a fresh guy with no experience and you talk to experienced players like Elisha or something, it like would be understandable if they have deep ears for you, but they were honestly pretty great to work with, and I learned a lot, especially from Nitro as an IGL and the way he sees the game.
It's been a really long time since then. Can you share a little about what Zeus wanted from you in those kind of circumstances? What kind of work you were doing in terms of prep and day-to-day work?
It was more prep for tournaments. Day-to-day it wasn't too much, but for example, I was just recording the scrims. I was ticking rounds like when we did something bad, so he had it easier in the review, so he instantly could go to the rounds and we could talk about it depending on which goals we had. And then also, obviously, again, when it came to analyzing opponents, I think I was always really, really good at finding weaknesses, at finding tendencies. During like my whole 4 to 5 years, I think that was my main focus point and I excelled in. And I already started helping him with preparing opponents. And also I think like what helps just coaches a lot, especially Zeus, who had a lot of success, but especially with SK, and but it started to go down a bit. I think just helping him getting a new perspective of the game, not like fully inventing everything new, but just a fresh look. And I think he could just like maybe pick 1 or 2 things, and it already helped him improve as a coach as well. So it was again more of offering all that I have and him picking like a few things that helped them as a team.
Can you tell me about your process of finding weaknesses in a team, or what you would do to kind of do that research, and maybe some of the outcomes of that, like maybe a weakness that you spotted back then or recently even?
I think like most of the players have tendencies, especially, for example, the way they use grenades. You can easily spot which setups they're using on CT side, and then you can make a proper plan around it. For example, VP, who always likes to keep utility, who doesn't use too much early and starts a bit of turtling up on sides, which you can exploit easily because early round you get a lot of room and you can hit them with fakes pretty easy. Or for example, Big on their T side, it was always pretty easy for us to play against them because they always wanted to set up perfectly. But if you were annoying as a CT, you were going for off-timing pushes, just little stuff like this, and a lot of focus on other teams. I think that helped us a lot. And also recently, what I can share from when we won, for example, Katowice against Heroic on Nuke. We had really good reads on their T side, because whenever they were, for example, getting the bomb down on A side, the next rounds, they like to go back to A again, but in a different way. Let's say they went out for HUD the round prior. The next round, if they get the bomb down and are close to winning the round, they will switch it up a bit and go D-late. They use Squeaky a lot more. Or for example, against Ents on Ancient in our Cologne run, you could see that we had Ilya set up on A side with the ARP almost every round, and he was our A anchor, because we just saw, okay, they like to switch up from game to game. The last game, they were hitting B and mid a lot, and the game prior to this, they were hitting A shit ton. And you could see like a pattern where they are changing it up from time to time, and the game before we played them on Ancient, they were hitting B a lot, so we had Ilya as an A anchor a lot, and then it's just like those mind games, but those mind games actually paid off a lot of time, at least for me. And I don't think that a lot of other teams spend too much time on it.
Yeah, you hear the concept of mind games a lot in interviews, but for the average person, it's really hard to understand what exactly those kind of mind games are. So when you talk about it, you mean these kind of things where they have these tendencies to hit a certain bomb site or switch it up every game to game, but you are kind of playing your own game within that, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. It's also really important for us always to not go too deep, because I did the same mistake at the start when I was actually the head coach of G2 in the end, that I can have a good example against Liquid, for example, on Vertigo. We were anti-stratting too much. I was saying like, if they molly on T side the B stairs, they always want to take it with numbers. But then they were doing the mind games. They were throwing the Molotov, and was only one guy, and we were over-rotating. And we lost, and the players are starting to lose their own game sense and their own feel of the game, you know. If you say they molly this, then this happens, then they start to play by the book and not by their feeling. And that's something that's really important as well, to give your players the freedom, especially in a top team. And that's what I think is really important, that I had to learn as well, to do it to a certain degree, but to always have a reaction ready. So if this molly happens, then what do we do, and not what do they do? So if this molly happens, we either push B if they don't come in the next few seconds, because then most likely it's just a fake, or we over-rotate heavy towards B. But always to have a good reaction ready, and the team with the best reactions is always the best team, I would say, especially on CT side. You could see it last year from Heroic with their stakes, and a lot of people said it's gamble stakes, but it was always like calculated risks to what's happening on the map, and they were just really good at reacting fast as a team without having to say too many words. So they had a lot of code words and were just rotating all over the place, and I think Heroic City side was really, really annoying last year, and yeah, just to have those reactions is really important.
How long did it take you to realize that? Was that something that you understood more when you went into a coaching role, or did you kind of figure that out when you were in the analyst positions as well?
No, I already figured it out as an analyst, but when you're actually a coach and you are a lot more hands-on, and you also get to talk more to players, for example, NiKo, who is insanely smart on CT side, he taught me so many things in a short time, especially on CT side Inferno, that I also, because at the start I was also like, why are they gambling so hard on CT side Heroic, like always 4 guys here? And then NiKo explained me the concept a bit more, and also said, look at what's happening on the map, look at the economy and everything, and then it started to make a lot more sense. But obviously I already had an idea back then, but when I was a coach and working a lot closer with NiKo, it started to make more sense.
Before we get into some of that work with the current G2 lineup or some of the players now, I want to talk a little bit more about your history as well. But just touching on the bit that you were saying about the way that you would analyze executes, for example, with the way Heroic would hit A site, can you explain what the process is as an analyst to kind of figure that information out?
Obviously, you have to watch a lot of demos, not only 1 or 2, because then the sample size is just too small. But you could always see a tendency also from a coach and from the IGL, from the opposing team. For example, Apex from Vitality, you can see a lot of times that if one thing is working, he will keep doing it, but just tweak a little bit. Let's say Mirage A is working, then he will split you from Con, he will split you from Palace, but the end goal is always going to be the same. and you can always start to see those little tendencies depending on who you play against and the way they operate. Also, the coach and IGL do, because that's then also something. When I worked with Remy, he was also saying, if it's working, why should we change it? And then it also makes a lot more sense. And once you're an analyst, you just have so many demos because it's like your only job, and you just go through and you look to see tendencies. What are they doing against anti-core? How are they executing on A? And then it really just comes down also to little things. For example, on Mirage, if they execute on A, do they have a lurk, or can we just over-rotate and not care about mid? And all those little details that you just get to see if there's like a big sample size. Because nowadays, as a team, you cannot change your playbook too much, right? Because you travel so much. You can only tweak a little bit. But like the whole philosophy will always stay the same. Like VP will always play slow, and you can create utility on CT side. So it's just coming down to a little bit of tweaks. But if you really watch a lot of demos, you get a pretty good grip on the teams.
For you, did a lot of that work come directly from just watching demos, or did you use a lot of other tools? Because I know over the years there's been a lot of different things that have been created with 2D maps, heat maps, and I think there was also, I don't remember what the tool was called, but it was essentially like a demo viewer that was outside of the game that a bunch of teams had access to.
Yeah, exactly. I was using Nohtes a lot, which was also extern, because it's just easier, and because the demo player, especially now in CS2, is just bullshit. And it's just a lot more time-consuming if you use in-game, So especially some players want it and some players don't want it. So it was always easier for me to just use 2D player, and you can just watch, for example, 5 CT sites, and you can combine them in like one session. You can just select all of them and then select for only gun rounds, and saves you so much time than having to go through every single demo. So I don't think anyone is really using demo player unless it goes towards executes and you want to see which utility they are throwing, where you can be anti-flash, which positions they molly and stuff. Then it's really helpful to go in-game.
I want to come back to some of the analyst stuff later when we get closer to your G2 stint, but going back to the whole time that you had with Liquid, you moved on from that team into the SK lineup. You said you were working closely with Zeus, so was that move kind of in line with that because he wanted to bring you along?
It was honestly one night. Ricardo, he was called Dead back then. He just wrote to me on Twitter. He was like, "Hey, Zeus told me good things about me. What do you want to join SK?" And I was like, "What the fuck?" Because for me it was like really impressive that like a team full of legends, is even interested in picking me up, because it was Fall and coldzera. It was like idols, and you were watching them daily. You were you were just in awe when you were watching them, and now they wanted to have me just because I did some good analyst work, and I was like, yeah, of course. And that was already when they were moving to Immortals, so it was like a transition phase where they were going to join Immortals, and he just wrote to me on Twitter, and then it was pretty easy, where Liquid also didn't want to like put something in my way. They were like, yeah, for sure, like SK is asking you, move on, like we don't want to block you or anything. And then I just joined SK basically the next day.
Yeah, that was a period where it was pretty shortly after they'd won their second major, I think a couple of months after. Obviously, one of the most acclaimed Brazilian lineups, probably the most successful still to this day. Can you tell me what joining that team was like and working with the Brazilian style for the first time? And because obviously you had the structured German Counter-Strike, and then you went to Liquid, which was the more North American style. So this stylistic transition, as you saw it from an analyst perspective and from trying to help with your research, what was that like between these teams?
Honestly, it was pretty weird, because when I joined them, like some players didn't even watch demos, they were just playing, but they were so good at playing that it didn't matter. Like, for example, Fer in Toilets, he was so good, you knew what was coming, like you knew he was pushing, he was going aggressive mid-round, but he was so fucking good that he just killed you. But back then, people were starting to figure them out, and I think that's when they wanted some external help, because it was going downhill a bit. Because once you're like the number one team, you have a red dot on your back and everyone wants to know what you're doing, how to beat you. And it's really, really hard to maintain a top spot nowadays. And back then they were just asking me to help individuals. That was literally like my only work. Where like Fur was asking me, how can I play toilets better? How can I be smarter? Because he was like, I know that I'm playing stupid, but it was working all the time. And then it's really hard for him to change his play style. But it was a lot of individual work. Fallen was asking me a lot how other oppos are playing. And before every game, he always wanted to know where are they peaking, where's the weak spot, how can I exploit the opponent up. And then coldzera just wanted to know pretty basic stuff all the time about his
position. Are you saying he didn't know the basics
do.
Of CS?
No. Basic stuff about what the opponent is doing, not basics about CS. But always, I'm just talking about opponents. Like, you always want to know basic stuff, like what are they throwing, how can I counter it, what can I do to play better in connector and all the star positions he had. And just like a lot of this stuff. Like, it was really hard for me also to get a good grip on the team because obviously I don't speak the language. And then, for example, I didn't listen into scrims because it was useless. Yeah. So I was just doing like stuff that they were asking me for and just trying to get them another view on the game, which I think worked pretty decently.
You say it was a lot of individual work, which is a pretty big contrast to how it seems like you're working with Liquid. Can you describe a little what that individual work was like and what exactly you're contributing, I guess, when these players were asking you to look into their positions?
Yeah, for example, as I said, Phil was asking me, he had problems on overpass. He was asking me how he could play better overpass A toilets. I was telling him people were starting to play a lot more together with the ARP because back then it was a lot of times double rifle or just in general the rifle playing aggressive and the ARP playing more passive. Then he started to play a bit more aggressive together with Fallen. They were doing a lot more cohesive re-aggressions rather than just him going through a smoke and praying to kill 2 or 3 guys. It like started to be more calculated risks. And Fallen, I remember it was Cobblestone was back then in the map pool. He had a few issues with Cobblestone. He was asking me on T side how he can have more impact with the ARP, where other ops are peaking. Then I was just doing like head-to-heads, for example, together with Device. I was analyzing Device's game, what he was doing, and if it suits Fallen's game, if he can take maybe 1 or 2 things out of it. And little by little, we were just trying to implement more things, and it doesn't always have to be that they need to invent the game new, but for example, for an ARPer, it can be 1 or 2 opening moves on CT side where he can go aggressive, where people set him up to get an entry, and it already gives you a lot of confidence, and it makes you play better, it makes you communicate better. It was a lot of those little things, I think, that they wanted from me and that helped them improve rather than telling them what they need to play because they won 2 or 3 majors already. They were fucking accomplished, so they just needed like a little bit of a fresh game, and I think that worked really well.
Stylistically, did you have to change your feedback at all because of the way that they played at all?
No, honestly not. I was also surprised about how good they were taking it again because, if you win 2 or 3 matches, then a new guy is coming and he's giving you some kind of feedback. Then it's always understandable if they would say no to it or they wouldn't like it, but I didn't have to change anything, honestly, because once you show that your work is good and that it makes sense, then they will start trusting you. And after 2 or 3 months, I think they saw that it's good and they fully trusted me and I could tell them everything.
As you said, it was, they were obviously speaking in Portuguese, so you weren't sitting in scrims, it was a little bit different in that sense. When it came down to working with individual players, like you said, Fur was asking you for help on certain positions, Fallen was, Cold was. When you were helping, was it basically through Fallen, or what was the process like for that? Were they directly coming to you, or was it a kind of team conversation?
It was mostly them coming directly to me, especially I remember before I was talking a lot on Twitter and Steam. With coldzera, I was writing a lot on Steam, so it was a lot more of them that they knew, okay, this guy is available. If you need some help, just use it. And then obviously I was weekly giving them feedback on what we were working and on what goal we were working towards and how they can make it faster towards this goal. So it was more of, I'm here. If you need me, write me, and I will make sure to help you.
And again, you were working mostly remotely during this period, or did you end up traveling with the team to events or boot camps or anything?
Again, only when it was in Cologne or pretty close, because I was still also doing my studies.
So on the times that you did get to go and travel with them, what was the experience like?
It was great. They were also honestly really nice. I remember in Cologne during the signing session and everything, they always wanted to have me with them, and even gave me, like, coldzera gave me a shot of his because their organization didn't make any for me in MIBR. Then I got one from coldzera, which I still have, which is like iconic for me as well. So, like, honestly, really nice guys, like no ego at all, and I would always work with them again because it was like a super nice experience. And I think all South Americans are really nice, like Furia, for example.
As someone who worked with Fallen during that period, he was a leader who kind of redefined the game in his style at that point. A lot of people were taking the videos that he was making and kind of adapting setups he had. Can you tell me, A, what working with him was like, but also kind of what his leadership was like during that period?
Yeah, like from what I remember from working with him, it was a lot of honest feedback, but without like flaming or anything. Like, he was pretty direct, but he never gave you like a bad vibe like some other players would do. But he was like really constructive and always wanted to improve the team. He was like really, really hardworking, and he just wanted to get the best out of everyone. And I think, like his leadership, for example, like pretty harsh, but which is just like a South American thing, but still in a way that you always want to play under him. Like when he was having speeches, even in Portuguese, I couldn't understand it, but you wanted to run through a brick wall for him, like it just gave you like those warrior vibes. And like for him, it was always important to be together as a team, to be strong together. Like just a lot of good values that he wanted to implement in the team that I think are nowadays still very important to have on a team like Furia.
So nowadays, when you watch a team like Furia, or when you've seen Fallen's development over the year, what are you seeing? Because it's obviously Furia has struggled recently, but even Fallen over the course of the last few years hasn't been able to reach that world beater level again. He did have the couple of good periods with Imperial where they made it to deeper major than expected, but even then it's Brazilian Counter-Strikes coming back in a way where it's not that old guard necessarily, like we have Big Azera on Pain and these other new teams that are coming up. So where do you see kind of his leadership evolution over the years and how it's fitting into the current way the game's played? What's missing, I guess?
I think it's always hard for people who have a certain way that was working really well to try and adapt to something new, and also trusting themselves and having people trust him, because obviously the transition period is going to be rough and it's not going to have like fast results. I think you can also see it with Big now, like their style doesn't fit CS2 at all. Like they are fully stuck in CSGO with perfect executes, everything has to be on time. And I think with Furia it was the same, like him and Art were completely different, where Fallen wanted to play more structured, and obviously Art as Nigel, he was always more with the chaos. Then before the last player break they were changing, that they wanted to play more structured, it didn't work out at all. And I think he had just not the best setup to shine as well, because I don't think he ever had like the full power and to have like his system implemented and the way he wants to play, because it was always Art. Obviously you can never make Art being you can never make him a fully controlled player. You cannot have him wait 50 seconds before he makes a move. You cannot make him do like moves that are out of the book. And I think now that they removed him and Fallen maybe gets to implement his system even more, I think they will be really good. And if they maybe add one or two more players that follow him, they trust the system, then I don't think that there is anything in his way to succeed again.
So you say Fallen's system is more structured, and you also say that Big's execute heavy structured system is currently not working in CS2. How do you think that will, what makes you think that if Fallen's able to implement his system, that will help change Korea's direction.
It's more about having 5 players that are buying in, as I said, because it's really hard when you have 1 or 2 guys who are not fully buying in and you play a system that might not suit the game as well, because then you're shooting yourself in down foot. But obviously I think Fallen is smart enough to realize that he has to adapt at some points and that he has to give players more freedom, because in this current meta you cannot play fully structured. But I think he was always structured, that he will give you the first 20 or 30 seconds he will tell you, okay, we are working towards finishing on B, but you guys have the freedom to go for little peaks to connector or something, but we end up finishing on B. That's already more than enough structure, I would say, for him to give. So he gives a direction and the players themselves can work towards reaching it with little moves. So I think that will help him and benefit him as well.
When you were working with them back then, did you get a sense that was similar to the structure he had? Because I know you didn't speak Portuguese, but in terms of the general help of the game plan or opening rounds, were you contributing to that, or what did you see from that?
I wasn't really contributing to it, but I could obviously see that players had a lot of freedom because they were really smart and the best players in their position at the time. So they did have decent amount of freedom, and as I said, he was just trusting them fully and they were all buying into the system. But if one guy is going out of line and you cannot trust him and you have to micromanage, then it's getting really hard, which I think was the case in Furia.
Also, back then you were working with Cold, 2-time #1 player in the world. Yeah. You said that he also was asking you for some help with certain things. Just in general, though, what did you see from him as a player who obviously had such high peaks, but then fell off over the years that came? Where do you think he went after that, and what were you seeing from him back then that we were maybe missing nowadays?
Honestly, he just had really high peaks because he was so confident and he knew he was better. When you go into the game knowing you are better, I think it's the same that Donk is doing right now. He's like a mini coldzera. He's not doing anything crazy tactically, but he's just taking every fight. He's playing with such confidence, and then it also, the team was playing around him. Taco, for example, he was always helping him. He would entry for him. On CT side, he would set him up with flashes. Everything was just set up around him, which kind of went away. You could see when Taco was leaving and the two of them weren't together anymore. They had this synergy and this blind trust with each other, that they knew what each other was doing. And as I said, they just were playing so well together. And I think the two of them, maybe this duo breaking up together, I think it also took away his confidence and the synergy that he had with him, and feels like he never really found his groove again with other people together in the team.
The common sentiment back then was that Cold was baiting Taco, or that Taco would basically hand over his life a lot for Cold. Do you feel like that was true?
No, I think as I said, people are not looking too deep into tactical stuff. Obviously, he's sending him out first, but it's not because he's saying Taco go run or something. Because it's Taco, first of all, got a lot of information with his T-side plays as well. If he was running into a stack, if he was running into 3 or 4 guys. And then obviously if you have a player like Taco who is really, coldzera who is really, really good at trading, then obviously you want to use it to his fullest potential, right? You can also see it with G2. HooXi is going first a lot because they have NiKo who is trading. They have Hunter back then in the pack as well, who is trading a lot. So it's not baiting if it's working, I would say, because it's obviously not just us telling him go run first and then we will play out, but we already have a plan in mind depending on what's happening and on the information he's giving us, because Taco was always really good at communicating and identifying CT setups as well if he just died. But sometimes information is worth a lot more than him getting 1 kill only or something. You
mentioned this transition to MIBR that happened afterward as well, but you actually didn't spend too long in that org. I think you were only there for maybe 2 weeks or something after the transition. Can you tell me about that process and what happened there?
I honestly don't remember exactly. I just remember that at some point they didn't need me anymore, which is understandable because I wasn't speaking the language. And I think at some point, if you don't speak the language, you just reached your potential and help that you can give. And it wasn't really successful as well in the end. So yeah, they just said, sorry, but you are gone, basically.
Okay, and then after that, there was a bit of a journeyman period for you because you didn't end up on a permanent team straight after. I think you had a stint on NRG. You even worked with Furia for a little bit. What were you looking for during that period, and what was working with those teams like?
Honestly, I was just looking for anything because it was always my dream to work in esports, and I was just asking around for teams, and Energy came to me. It was I'm a Pet who asked me, which was a bit unfortunate in the end because once I signed and joined, they told me, okay, the team is dead after the major, and I was like, oh, nice to know. And I think Tariq and Ko were in the team. And he just told me, after this major, the team is dead, so you can already look for something new. And I'm like, okay, nice to know. So that's why it was like, I don't know, maybe 1 or 2 months. I don't even remember how long it was. It was really short. And then, Furia was actually really, really nice because Guerri, he came to me because he also heard good things about me in the Brazilian scene. But yeah, it was for 1 year, I think. But it was really hard again for me because also I have to factor in time zone difference and everything when they were practicing, because back then a lot of teams were still practicing in NA. There were still a lot of decent teams. It was really hard for me to go to university and trying to be in scrims afterwards and not being fully depressed and burned out because I couldn't see my friends. But Furia honestly was really nice. I didn't get to work too much with individuals, but I helped the coach a lot with setting up game plans, and I think we were one of the first teams who managed to break Astralis win streak on NuK back then.
At ECS, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That was like 1 or 2 months in, and I think we had a really good game plan against them on NuK, and they were pretty surprised because back then Furia also wasn't like a top team on NuK. We just started to become pretty decent at it, and that was like one of the proudest moments for me as well as an analyst, because I could actually see the impact I had and the game plans that were working out again, because I again excelled at like finding weaknesses in opponents, and he was also really good at giving me the space and trusting me with it.
Can you tell me about what the kind of game plan you created for that game was? Because that was a relatively big moment in history, so I want to hear more about that.
Honestly, hard to tell you now, but I think it was just we were trying to hit them a lot more with fakes, because back then Furia was a lot about full manpower wherever they were going. It wasn't like too deep of a playbook with having good fakes, but we were starting to fake a lot inner and going outside on timing. When they were thinking we were hitting inner, we were hitting inner second wave a lot. Like a lot of those little things that Furia didn't have in their game plan, but that isn't like, again, too big of a change, but just some little tweaks that we were faking more and having a lot more aggressive CT side, because Astralis again was really good at setting up, but we never really gave them the space to set up properly. We were pretty annoying, also with a bit of stupid plays, crossing smokes and stuff, but that's how you win against those top teams when you're the underdog. And yeah, just showing them that we are not afraid of setting the pace. That was like mostly the thing, but I can't tell you too much in detail. I don't remember.
Astralis back then were also super structured. They had a defining moment in the game. Can you tell me about watching that team rise and kind of what you were seeing from them, and whether you started pulling any of their style, any of their plays that they were doing, and what it's like as an analyst when you see a team that dominant? What are you kind of doing, whether it's to counter them or to bring stuff into your own team?
Yeah, what I'm trying to look at a lot with Astralis especially was like their teamwork and cohesion on CT side. And also Device, who was moving around a lot. Like if he was shooting on ramp, then in the next 10 seconds, for example, he was outside. So it was always really hard to predict where he was going. And a lot of those micro decisions was something that I tried to implement into the teams, so that it's not static on CT side, but that it's a lot of teamwork together, flashing for each other, trying to do little traps. Like they were starting to have, for example, the ramp player on outside, and then had Device on ramp and like setting up a trap so people were running into him blindly because they were calling ramp players outside. And just like they were pioneering little stuff like this that was really nice to watch. And then obviously the structured T side where everyone exactly knew what he was doing. It was super clean and just trying to make the team work better and buying in on the same system, because Sonic also said that it's so important that everyone is buying in the same system. You don't need to have the strongest players, but if you have like the strongest team with the strongest mindset and trust in each other, you can win against anyone. And I was just trying to show them the importance of not only shooting good, but to have a good system, to have a good structure, to buy in, and to not be overly negative, especially during a game, because I remember they also put a lot of focus to always focus on next. And in some teams I had, we were always focusing in freeze time on what happened in the previous round, and that steals 5 to 10 seconds of your precious time in freeze time, and it makes everything super chaotic. You could just see that they were not wasting those 5 to 10 seconds, and like micro adjustments like this are really important.
From what you mentioned earlier as well, was you're working still remotely and there's this busy circuit going on. It was pretty crazy from, I think, 2016 to 2018 or so.
No.
It was tournaments every week, it felt like.
No.
Every other week, there's teams going directly from one to the other. Even though you were working from home, the process of having teams ready for their next event and to prep going into all of those, what was that like as an analyst, even with not having to travel with the team?
Honestly, it's pretty exhausting. And also back then, during majors, we had this system where we didn't know who we were playing until like the evening or something. Because back then there was like this calculator and stuff, and I remember like it was being drawn on scene, and then Gob had the famous fuck moment on stream when he was drawing something, and it was like back then it was a lot harder to do because you didn't have all the programs as well. Like you didn't have a Nohtes, you didn't have the refrag and everything that you have nowadays. So it was a lot more manual work, and also it was really important to have a good structure when it comes to having backup work. So for example, when I was working on VP 3 weeks ago, I still knew how they would play, but just had to look at small details that they would change. So it was really important to kind of have a database and to be really structured with it. That's also why I think being a German is really good, because I always had everything start. I still have everything that I worked on from 2017, and I could always go back and see, okay, what the fuck, now in the next 3 demos they changed their playstyle maybe, or they did something completely different. And then I spent more time looking at them because they were changing something fundamental, instead of like when I was watching another team and I saw, okay, nothing crazy changed, then we can just use the game plan we used 2 weeks ago, but just change it a little bit. So it was like really important to have like a really good database.
Before we move, the God B moment, I think, wasn't at a major though. It was some
Swiss moment or something that I remember.
It was some show match type thing almost, where the audience bid on what map they play or something like that, and then they had to pick from a box.
Maybe,
but after that period where you were on NRG briefly and then into Furia, you did end up joining G2 as an analyst, where you spent the rest of your career. I think you joined in 2019, if I'm not mistaken.
4 years.
4 long years. And when you joined, it was this weird French lineup that had Kenny S and Amanek and Jax, and I think even Shocks at first, who was leading. Then he left. He left pretty soon after you, maybe like a month or two. What was it like joining that team and coming into yet another entirely different style of Counter-Strike with French majority French lineup?
It was honestly really fun. Like they were one of the nicest guys that I ever talked with, and it was like a really rough period for them as well. They weren't doing too good, and they always wanted to go international afterwards, and they didn't know what to do. And Kenny was having a bit of a downtime after he was in his prime all the time. It was really hard for him as well, because he always was this like star player, but now all of a sudden he was having some down periods. Then we had like some stylistic issues. We didn't know how to play directly. And then we lost our IGL as well. like HooXi was leading, but he didn't really like it too much. But overall, like a really good experience, and like also again really thankful that they brought me in. But I could speak French at least a little bit, so I understood what they were talking. But I never really liked to talk, but I could understand almost everything. But it was definitely interesting experience again, and it helped me improving again, because overall, like the experiences I had were just like really fruitful for me as well. I had Zews, I had Fallen, then I had HooXi, I had Malek. Like I could basically cherry pick from some of the best coaches and ITLs to improve myself and to be like the best version of everyone basically, and trying to be the best person, the best coach, the best analyst, because I had so much experience from working with top guys, so I also didn't want to disappoint them.
That kind of experience with so many different styles, and it being 2019, what was the, I guess, moment like for you joining G2 and trying to integrate all of your past experience between these different lineups and these different styles and teams that you'd had before into this?
What I learned the most, and what is the most important thing nowadays still, is that every player needs like individual treatment. Like you cannot go to Kenny and say, hey, I worked with Fallen, this worked really well with him. But I just realized, okay, I have to spend time first with everyone, get to know them, and then adapt my different styles that I was able to learn from, and trying to tweak them and getting to know them. But the most important thing that I learned and that helped me with every team was that it's really important to put like the human side first. Like if you are a good human, if you are nice to them, if you don't be overly nice, like don't say everything is good, but if you're a good human, you listen to them, like they will give it to you back 10 times. Because I always like compared it with a thing that I had with teachers, like back in school when you had a teacher that was really boring, that was just talking his stuff, that was just explaining, but didn't care about you individually. You never wanted to go back and ask him questions. But if you had like an interactive teacher who was asking you in the middle of the class if everything is good, that you always wanted to ask more, you wanted to know more. And during my time with the players, I also realized if I just tell them, hey, this worked 2 years ago, you should do this, but not ask them about, do you like it, does this fit your style, then they would never like want to work with me. But back in G2, when I was working a shit ton with Kenny, like we were working almost every day, and I was trying to improve him, he was trying to improve with me. Like he was coming by himself, he was saying, Jan, I really like what we are doing together, I want to improve on vertigo even more, I want to do this. And then I was always like trying to have it interactive, and not like me telling him, hey, do this, do that, but hey, let's try this, and maybe you tell me what you saw as well, and then we can work on a common ground. So I think that was like really important for me, because there are some coaches out there also that I learned from that were like really strict and were only following it was only like his way, or like you were out. And then I always saw, okay, the players don't like it at all. And then I was working, for example, with Zews, who was giving them maybe a little bit more freedom, and you can already see the players were enjoying it more. So I was just learning that sometimes, okay, it's very important to be strict, but me, myself, like I always created a style. I want them to ask me. I don't want to give them the solution. I want them to get to the solution, but me obviously helping him with the tools to get to the solution, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. As you worked with this lineup more, I mean, there was this point where you could basically joined, and then I think within a few months, you ended up making this run to second place at Kato. But it was right as everyone went into COVID, so there was no audience there. But still, early success at one of the biggest tournaments. What was that kind of deep run that early for you working with this team like? And what was kind of your contribution at that point, since it was still relatively early into your time on the team?
I mean, obviously it was great because it always boosts your confidence and it shows you that the work you do is good. But back then I was remembering I was working a lot more hands-on with the team. As I said, I was working more with Kenny and trying to improve him daily and getting him back to his prime and getting him to where I know he belongs. And I still know that he can easily be one of the top players. But it was a lot more about trying to get them on the same page and trying to find the right style. And I think in the end, like you could see doing this run as well, they were buying in a lot more. They were trusting each other and they were swinging for each other, something that they didn't do before. And as soon as this little bit of confidence came, you could also see the spark in them, because then they start to realize, okay, we are actually really fucking good and we can go far. And once you like this switch flicks, then you can become really, really good as a team, even though you might not have the best individuals. But as soon as they got this confidence back and we were starting working on those mental things and they saw the result, I think it started working a lot better.
Kenny S was obviously one of the best operators in the world for a good period. Where do you feel like his struggles came from? As you say, you were working with him very, very closely, but he never quite reached that level again after, I think, after the online period, more or less.
Yeah, I think he's a really emotional guy, and as soon as things don't work out well for him from the first round, basically, he starts to tilt a bit, he starts to maybe adjust his mouse a bit differently, he starts to change this and that. Like, he's a type of guy that you knew if he has, like, for example, a good pistol round and a good first gun round, you knew he's going to pop off. But as soon as he was playing a bit slow, no matter how good the team was playing, but if he had a bad individual game, you could see like the doubts in his head, and you could also see like the external noise was getting to him, because people were saying it's his downfall. And even though as a player you say you don't read it or you don't let it get to you, it slowly but surely gets to you, and then you start thinking about it, and that's when it, like, really his downfall started as well, like when everything got to his head. And yeah, you could also see on camera sometimes, like, he was the type of guy who started to be very visibly frustrated, throwing up his hands sometimes. And that's like that kind of thing that will definitely not help you perform better in game. And I think, like, if he had a better, or even if he had a mental coach back then, I think he would have been a lot better as well, because a lot of his stuff wasn't mechanically, but it was mentally.
You say you worked so closely with him. Do you feel like you were kind of playing a part as a bit of a mental coach as well in that aspect?
Yeah, I was trying it, but obviously I'm like not a certified mental coach, but I was obviously, my job is to show him when he's good, right? And I was showing him clips where he played really good, when he was in the zone, when he was himself, and he also realized that he saw it. Yeah, when I'm in the zone, when I'm focusing on the game, focusing on comms, then I'm really, really fucking good. And then we obviously also showed him the negatives, when he was frustrated, when he was starting to tilt, when he didn't communicate. And we were slowly but surely trying to get him there. But like with him, I think you can also see it now, like, he's just a very emotional guy and an emotional driven guy. And if you're not working with him on it on a daily basis, and because I also don't know exactly how to fix it, rather than just showing him things he did good, then it's just really hard for me to fix this stuff.
As you continued to work with them, obviously after that second place at Kato, we went online. COVID kind of demolished the circuit as we had it.
Yeah.
And we were online for essentially the next year and a half. During that period, there is obviously Nexa, who is coming in as the IGL. Can you tell me what you saw from him and what working with him was like? Because he ended up relinquishing that role in the current roster. So I'm trying to see what the initial period was like for you with working with him back then.
Yeah, I think back then we got Nexa and Hunter as like a package deal together from Crazy. Mm-hmm. And we kind of wanted IGL who is giving more freedom, because you could see with Crazy, obviously, they were playing a bit more free. They weren't like playing too structured, and I really liked like the view of his he had on the game, but he was even working too hard at some points, and it was burning him out to be an IGL, and he was trying to fix everything at once. But I think overall, like, the view that he had on the game, and that he gave us a lot more freedom than we had with HooXi, I think that's what the team needed, and which is also the direction that G2 kept taking after having him as an IGL, with exception of Aleksib, obviously.
You also had NiKo join during that online period. Superstar NiKo from phase. Can you tell me what you saw from him and what that level is like? Because you mentioned earlier that you learned a lot from him. So generally, what that process was like, and what all you were learning from him, I guess, and what you saw from him.
Yep. Him especially, I was working a lot with him on CT sites. Like, he always wanted to know new things on CT site. He wanted to know how are people taking banana, what's the meta, because then on T side he was also always trying to counter what CT was doing in banana. Like Inferno was like in CSGO, it was like his trademark. Like, he knew everything. Like, he wanted to have reactions for every smoke that terrorists were throwing. Then on the other side, he wanted to have reactions on every CT utility that was being thrown in banana. Like, if they were throwing deep utility, he wanted to instantly get ahead of it, get flashes. Like, he started to bring a lot of those reactions to the team that I was mentioning earlier, and like his sense of the game was like something that I didn't experience before, and combined with like his eagerness to learn, even though he was pretty accomplished back then already, except for winning a major. But he was already pretty accomplished, but he was still always trying to improve. He was so hungry for feedback, and that also started to lit a fire in everyone else, because you could see, okay, he's not just here to steal a paycheck or to show up to practice and be there, or just show up for games. But you could see that he was like really starting to take over a role as a captain as well. And he was like the best addition that G2 ever had, I would say.
That kind of eagerness and that self push that he had, is that something you still saw towards the end of your days in G2?
Yes, always. Like, if people say that NiKo is toxic for some reason, like, obviously maybe sometimes he's slamming a desk or something, but it's never because he's tilted on anyone, but it's always because he wants to win so badly, and he's just mad on himself or something. And there was also this clip with Dennis where he was telling him to shut up during mouse, but he explained it to me that it was Dennis, for example, talking during freeze time, complaining about the next round, but people always just see those snippets and then brandmark a guy for the rest of his life, basically, because they saw this clip and then they say, okay, NiKo is toxic. But honestly, NiKo was never toxic to a teammate without a reason, and the reason was always to improve or to win the game, because sometimes people forget things, and he always wanted to play very perfect CS on CT side, and if people were starting to forget things, he was just getting mad because we were just talking about in theory, something that is pretty understandable, I would say, on this level. So, like, even now I know that this guy still has the eagerness to improve. I know he's deathmatching daily, he's watching demos, and like, I would say he's like the best teammate I worked with in like those 4 years by far, not even close.
As we came out of COVID, there was Cologne, where you guys, again, were the runners-up to NAVI, and followed by the Stockholm Major, where there was obviously a very close run, but the classic NiKo Deagle whiff on that's in memory. But in general, also just that dominant NAVI period that they had. For G2 to come out of COVID, where the results weren't amazing, and then hit the ground running like that, what was that like, seeing the team starting to actually flourish a little bit?
I think one of the most important things with this team was always that they are super, super good on stage. Like, as soon as we got out of group stages, I knew that we will make semis or finals, because they are so good at playing with the crowd and taking the energy from the crowd and being like it. With this team, it was just next level. Or even when I was coaching, like, as soon as we hit the stage, like, communication was next level, commitment was next level, and it was like day and night compared to studio performances. For example, obviously the Fate Rio Major or something. Like, when COVID ended and we also started to at least play for arenas again, you could already feel the hunger in them, because they knew, okay, finally we play in arenas again. We were hitting the ground because the motivation was there to play in arenas again, and it was like really nice to see, because I knew the potential they had as soon as they get in front of the crowd.
Could you see that motivation and fire was lacking during COVID then?
Yeah, I think it was for everyone, because everything just gets very monotone, right? And you wake up, you don't go really outside, you are used to traveling, you are used to seeing each other, you are used to having boot camps. It's like a lot of your rhythm that you had for 10, 15 years for players like NiKo just all of a sudden changes, and you're alone, you're in your room. It starts to get depressing. You play Counter-Strike in your room, whereas before you would go traveling, you would go to Sydney, see different things, play from there. But now all of a sudden, 1.5 years, you are playing from inside, and then Cologne obviously doesn't feel like Cologne at home from your PC, right? Even though you play IM Cologne, it could also be Thunder Peak tournament, so to say. So like there's a huge difference, and obviously a bit lack of motivation.
During that online period, as you said, there was less travel. For you, that was a big factor in why you ended up retiring. What was it like for you not having to travel to events as much? And what was analyst work like for you during that period as well?
I mean, for me, honestly, not too much changed, because I was with G2 in a good spot where I could basically choose where I wanted to go. So I was there during most of the playoffs, but I didn't really travel far. I never went to the US. I only went to Katowice playoffs. I went to Stockholm Major playoffs. So not too much changed for me, I would say. I still had my rhythm, and when you were an analyst, it was more of a pain in the ass to travel, because back then tournament organizers didn't offer you anything as like an assistant coach. You had to bring your laptop, then you had shitty hotel Wi-Fi, which I guess you know best.
Yep.
And you had to download demos, you had to set up on your laptop. And it was honestly more of a pain in the ass to travel rather than being at home in your setup and knowing everything will work, especially when you are time limited.
After that point, you were promoted to the assistant coach after the Stockholm run.
Yeah.
And then Monesi joined as well. Pretty marquee moment for the organization now, because he's become such a good player, basically established himself as the first or second best player in the world right now. When he joined, what was the team environment like before he came in? Because there's obviously the Stockholm run was really close, but it was a failed chance to win a major, essentially. So what was the environment like before he joined and then immediately after?
We just felt like we could never really get it over the hump, and we never really felt that we were able to win. It sounds stupid, but if you always get second and then you start going into finals with like a bit of this fear in your head that, okay, can we actually win? Can we not win? And I think as soon as Monesi joined, and we finally had like a really, really good op, because we always had, not to be mean, but we never really had a good op, right? Armanek wasn't an op, for example. He was just filling, and we never really had this game-changing op, I would say, with the international lineup at least. We never had this op that can win us games, and as soon as Monesi joined and we saw like from the first or second practice even, and we saw what he could do, we were like, holy shit, okay, we can actually start to win tournaments now. And it just changes everything in the team dynamics as well, because people start to believe again, and they know, okay, we will win tournaments. It's just a matter of time and how long we need to glue together.
And how did your work as an analyst evolve during that period, I guess, between the run and the major? Maybe tell me a little about what your work was like at the major specifically before he joined, and then how it might have developed afterward.
I think it was also a coach change in between, right? Because we got Remy, and then I was promoted to assistant coach as well, right? I remember, because I was also interims coach before when Malik was about to leave. I did ESL Stockholm in winter with the team, and Nexa also had visa problems, which was fun again. We played with stand-ins, we played with Kenny again. We got Kenny back for this tournament, and back then I already started being more hands-on, because I knew Remy wanted me more as an assistant coach and more hands-on rather than what Malik wanted me to do, because with Malik it was a lot of paperwork, like Google Docs for meetings, only working together with Kenny really. And when we had the talks with Remy, he always said, I don't want you to do this dry work, because what I was doing as an analyst was really dry. I was only doing Google Docs, preparing stuff like this. And with Remy, he always wanted to know what I wanted to do, and he always wanted me to work hands-on with the players and to be on the same level as him, which like really changed the dynamic there as well, because I suddenly started to have like weekly meetings with the players. I started to especially work a lot with Monesi to get him on speed, especially with like international team, because he was never speaking English. I was just playing a lot with Ilya as well, like one-on-ones here where he was supposed to call out spots, so he would get to know this faster. And then also together with Aleksib back then, I was working a lot directly with him, preparing game plans with him, even without Remy. Like we were starting to be like a really good unit, and I was really thankful for Remy also to allow me the space and to give me this step up rather than just having this try work again, because this is when I started to like really see a new side and have this passion for a coach and seeing how sick it can be and how much impact more you can actually have on individual players when you meet with them weekly and you have goals together with them.
When you were working with Aleksib and XTQZZZ during this time, how did the process change for you specifically outside of doing less of the dry work and doing more of the analyst work? What was the difference like in terms of your analyst work and what they were asking from you, and how you were, I guess, researching the game at this point?
Yeah, Aleksib was especially asking me for a lot more help on his T-side calling, on what he can improve, on where I saw maybe some flaws with his game, because he was really structured and he never knew anything else. And then Remy also wanted to play really structured, which he's still doing in Vitality, but he always wanted to know if he could maybe change a few things. Or then Monesi, for example, wanted to know a lot about different oppers. He always asked me, hey, what is the opponent opper doing? How can I exploit him? For example, on Mirage T-side, is he starting window a lot? If I smoke window, is he rotating CT? Is he rotating B? Where can I exploit him? A lot of this stuff, and it just got a lot more personal and a lot more focused on macro things, whereas before it would be more of the big picture. It started to be a lot more focused on little moves. With Monesi, I was working towards having him to have one CT opening on every map that he has that is pretty unexpected. I was working on having him rifle a bit more on T side, because we saw how fucking good he's with rifling, how good he's with entering. And yeah, it just got a lot more specific, whereas before it would be, okay, create a game plan. Okay, tell me what do you see overall in the big picture, but now it like got really, really specific.
Can you describe maybe what some of those openings might be, or what you were doing specifically to kind of guide those plays?
Yeah, for example, with Ilya, we were seeing at the start that he was starting Mirage window literally 80% of the rounds. But then we were saying, okay, Ilya, you are so good. Let's give you an opening together with checks where you would pick a ramp early on Mirage. Or then I would tell him, okay, rather than starting window, jump out window, go up mid together with NiKo. And like just little moves like this where he's still starting in mid, but he's like having a lot more initiative. But it's not egocentric, so it would always make sense, and he would always have a teammate with him, and it wouldn't just be him. Okay, now you jump out window and you go up mid and you pray that you kill 3 or something. But we always tried to make him, first of all, more vocal, because he would just start behind window, behind the smoke, not say a word until NiKo said, okay, rotate towards ticket or something. But slowly but surely, we started to have him communicate more. And when you start giving him an opening like this, where we would say, okay, start ramp, then in 1 or 2 weeks he would say, okay, I want to do this by himself. Whereas at the start it would always be, we want you to do this. But as an op, nowadays you are so important and you have such a big task to fill that you should actually dictate the pace on CT side, not your teammate. And now I think like Ilya is doing fantastic work, and his improvement is insane for being on the scene for over a year, and like a year and a half now. In tier 1, like towards the end, like his communication is insane. Like he exceeded all the goals that I set for him like 10 times. Like he always asks for different starters now. he's like dictating CT paces, and he's telling people to do this or that for him, which he realized is really important as an opera. So yeah, at the start it was a lot of small goals that are slowly but surely evolving in big goals, like improving communication and making sure you know how important you are as an opera.
I remember back when he joined, there was conversation within the team and in interviews that it was, I guess, a task to nurture him and help him develop over time. So that conversation was about this kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And it was a lot also on NiKo. Like NiKo was spending countless hours with him watching demos, because obviously they are working together in most maps like Mirage and Mid. They're working together. Like he was just helping him get a lot of openings and seeing the game differently, because NiKo obviously has a ton of experience working with Guardian and other great operas, and he was just also trying to slowly but surely mentoring him, but without too much pressure and without too many expectations at the start. But as I said, like Ilya was giving back a lot more than we ever expected.
How long did it take for him to, I guess, take the reins himself and decide that he wanted to make these plays and start asking you for these kind of things?
I would say it took definitely like 6 to 7 months. He was like starting to get really, really good at it at like the middle end of last year. He got really good at it.
So by then there was these other results that happened. You got, again, second at Kato. Trophy keeps eluding you. And then you got grouped at Antwerp, which was a pretty sad result for the team. Can you tell me what that was like, reflecting back on it now, especially with this whole period where Aleksib was the IGL and what we've seen from him now, because there's a lot of conversation about this period he had in G2. So a little about that and what you saw from him and these results towards the end of his period.
I think what we lacked most back then was that we were too systematic, and we had Ilya, for example, supporting a lot of times where he should have been more explosive or more of an entry type of guy. And I think it was pretty easy also to read us, because Ilya never did anything crazy with the ARP. We were playing pretty execute heavy. And if you have this play style and you start to crumble, then you don't have a player in vital moments who is going to make the difference. For example, in a major like Antwerp, if you are like 1-2 and you have the systematic approach, you don't have any player who really is going to step up and say, okay, let me pick this, because you're always going to be scared of people's opinion if this move fails because you didn't do it in practice or it's not your system. And I think that was one of the biggest reasons also why we failed, because we were just too systematic and the players didn't really fit the system. Like, you can't have Monesi trying to support most of the rounds.
Did that process of how systematic you were come from Aleksib, or what was the reason behind that?
Yeah, it was Aleksib, but it was also on Remy. Like, he was also very systematic. But they were trying to improve it, but it's really hard because Aleksib was always systematic, and it's really hard to change an IGL, especially because it was also one of his first times in the international roster, I think, because he was coming from Finnish speaking, and it wasn't too easy for him as well to adapt. And then it was really hard for him and Remy to get on a common ground as well, because Remy's English back then wasn't the best. And then it's really hard to have like a coach IGL combo who is not on the same page and who isn't speaking the same language properly, you know, and it was like set up for failure, I would say, at some point.
When you say set up for failure, do you mean from the start, basically when the roster was formed with XTAZ and Aleksib?
I think people could have just done more effort talking to each other and also making more effort to improve the language barrier, right? Because you can learn the language and try to do better and trying to improve faster, which was also something we had with Czechs, because his English was pretty bad as well. I guess you can remember as well. And I think if people would have given more effort on both sides, it could have been solved easily, but people didn't want to, or I don't know why, but people just didn't give enough effort to solve a pretty simple problem.
Something Blade also mentioned was this idea that it's very hard to change an IGL after they've been around for so long, they've established their system. Seeing Aleksib win the major and seeing this NAVI team now, what do you see as the differences? Are you seeing that system having changed, and how much influence do you kind of see on Aleksib's system having changed between his work with Blade?
I think he now has a coach who's obviously also really systematic, and they are having like this good groove together. I think it's so important that your IGL and coach combo is working really well. I think you could saw it with Ents, with Snappy and Saw. The IGL coach combo was working really well. I would even say me and HooXi were working really well together. We were like really good outside of the game, inside of the game. And as soon as you have like this combo with your coach, I think it's just so much easier to listen to him, to listen to his input. And I think they just suit really well. Like, he wants to play more systematic. Obviously, Blade was always very systematic. Where when you read his papers, it's pretty systematic. So I would say they like match made in heaven, and you can see, and I'm really happy for him that it's like bearing fruits now.
Even with this major one, I guess this major one has helped people realize Aleksib's potential, because he did have a lot of doubters for quite a while, especially with his periods on NIP and on G2. From that sense, what did do you feel like that conversation was justified? Do you feel like he was not able to take advantage of the talent he had, or how do you feel regarding what Aleksib's potential was with his previous teams?
I think, again, he never had a good system to shine. Like in NIP, you could see very bad system. Like, they were changing players, they were changing spots. He told me they had academy players here, they never had a real op. Then how do you want to shine as an IGL, really? In G2, he did have like good players, but he didn't like really do well with the coach. So there was always some problems, and he never really had 100% backup of everyone and everyone buying into his system. So I think it's pretty unfair to say that he never showed his full potential, because now you can see what he can do with young players, but that are buying into his system, that are trusting him, and that they are doing everything that he demands them to do. So I think it's really not fair to say that he never showed anything.
After that period with G2, he went out with these results, and you had JKS and HooXi come in.
Yep.
That team obviously was... seeing Aleksib go out now might look bad in hindsight, just given the fact that he's won the major. But as you said, the coach dynamic wasn't working, and there's a lot of other factors behind it. But reflecting on that change now, how do you feel about the decision to bring in HooXi and add JKS?
Honestly, obviously really good, but
yeah.
It was not easy from the start. Like for HooXi, it was really, really hard to adapt to an international team. He came from Copenhagen Flames, where he was playing a bit with friends. He was never really a tier 1 IGL or even a tier 1 player, and he had issues adapting to being the IGL to NiKo, and he always told me that he's not scared, but he's respecting them a lot, and it's hard for him sometimes to have authority against them, and that he was a bit scared of it. But we were just working really hard on getting the team on the same page again, because at the start it was also different, because when you're an international team, like, every culture is different. You make different jokes. For example, like, the Serbs are like more direct, like, the jokes are different than a European guy sometimes, like a Danish guy who might not be used to a bit harsher jokes. And it was like the first few months were like really rough, considering the team dynamics and trying to get everything work. And then we had Justin, who was really silent, who we also had to get to work. So like the first few months weren't like really in-game situated at all, but like getting the team on the same page and getting everyone to buy in and understanding each other.
That process also was something that you started contributing to a lot more, because Xtaz left the team towards the end of the year, and then you ended up taking over as interim, and then soon actually moving into the coach role. But you also brought the team one of their first titles in a very long time at Blast World Final to end that year. what was the process of you taking over coaching duties, bringing that title home, and kind of starting to work more in that role with HooXi and trying to help this team find their ground?
It was honestly interesting because it was very sudden. Like, we didn't know at all that Jerome and Remy would leave us, so it was pretty much thrown into cold water, and I was told, you are a coach now. You have to lead, obviously, day-to-day operations, and they wanted to see until the end of the year how it's going to go. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm doing it. And until Blast, honestly, we just tried to keep doing everything because we didn't have time to change. I didn't have time to implement anything. We just kept doing what we did. We just adjusted a bit, like we were starting to have proper theory. We had like goals for the day and all this kind of stuff, which helped us work towards having better team dynamics. And but once we got to Abu Dhabi, honestly, we didn't expect to go out of groups because we got to know that HooXi's dad unfortunately died when he was on the plane to Abu Dhabi. We were landing and his mom was calling him 20 times or something, which was really sad. And then obviously when you get this kind of message, like you don't think about a tournament right away. He was even thinking about flying back. Yeah. But he said he wants to make his dad proud, which I respect highly, because I could have totally understood if he said, fuck it, I'm going back, my mom needs me. Because it's obviously just his mom and his sister, and bro, more power to you. Go back and help them. But I respect it really highly. And I think, as bad as it sounds, this put us so together as a team. It was crazy. You could see on the server, people were fighting for him. They were listening to every call 5 times more. They wanted to do everything to make him happy, to make his dad proud. And we were more of a unit than we ever were before because of this sad circumstance, which I obviously don't wish to anyone and don't wish to happen again. But this made us such a cohesive unit and fighting for each other, which was really, really also for myself. I was really proud of the guys, how they handled it, how they gave space to HooXi. They were there for him instantly. They hugged him. They said, we understand it if you don't want to go. We understand it if you don't want to prep. Hunter said, I will go the extra mile. I will help you with preparation. Everyone was just chiming in, and you could see the trust was building up and the cohesiveness was growing from this tournament on. And yeah.
After this tournament, we went into the next year where you did finally win Kato. A long time coming after those second places. A big win for you. And then there is the major, again, that ended with another group stage exit, which was the last CSGO major, NiKo's last chance. There was a lot of pressure and conversations around that at the time. Can you take me inside of the team a little bit and what the dynamic was like and what some of the conversations were like around that period, especially after starting the year so strong, but then having that result come in?
I think just to go back a bit, after World Finals, we finally saw that, okay, we can actually win, because they were always second place, but as soon as we won, we knew, okay, we go into tournaments now and we are actually title contenders. We are not second place contenders, but we know what it takes. And then we went into Katowice. We started pretty slow, I think. We got into lower bracket as well in the group stage. But we kept fighting, and we went all the way again. And as soon as we also got Edward as a mental coach who helped us, he was telling us and helping us a lot more at seeing days the same way. For example, a grand final for us was just day 15 out of 15, for example. We were treating the start of the tournament like a grand final, so the discrepancy wasn't too high and the emotions weren't too different. When we started tournament, for us it was day 1 out of 15, and we were treating it the same. The routine was the same. We were walking, we were having theory, we were having 1 hour of downtime. Everything was the same up until the grand finals, where for the players it then didn't feel too big. It didn't feel like a grand final, but it felt like another day in the office. Obviously there were a bit of nerves, but the best we could do as a staff to make it feel the same, we tried to do. And I think this also helped the guys a lot, because they also said, okay, it's a grand final, but for me it's the same because my routines are the same, everything is the same. It doesn't feel so big. Whereas in the past, we would always be a bit more pressured. We would say, oh, it's grand finals, we need to do this, we need to do that. But in the end, we saw that, okay, it's just a regular day in the office, don't do anything crazy, play your game. And yeah, this helped us a lot. That what really contributed a lot, I would say.
So by the time you rolled around to the major, you'd been a coach for a couple of months at that point, and it was a very high pressure moment for the team, and the end result obviously wasn't what you guys would have wanted. For you as someone who had just transitioned from being an analyst to a coach, what was it like working with the team, and what did you see both in terms of the difference between your role and how you maybe had to manage personalities, as well as kind of what the team environment and dynamic was like coming from something like the Kato win into such a sad result?
I mean, I could definitely see it all the time during the major that it was more tense, like players were tense, it was more pressure, like we didn't want to have this feeling of not qualifying ever again in our lives because it just felt so bad. And I think it was the one where we started 16-0 against Ecstatic. Yeah. And then we struggled again. We were losing to Bad News Eagles and we were losing to all those teams that we shouldn't. And it was just like people just doubting each other and not trusting fully, not buying into the system. And then people wanted to make the difference individually, which didn't work. And it was just very different to what we practiced and to the system that we wanted to have. And as soon as you go out of like your practice habits or just stuff that you are used to and that or the reactions that you have, and you start to change them up because you feel the pressure, you want to do something different. I think that's when it always gets to the players. And then obviously against Fnatic, I also fucked up the veto with going to Vertigo because we expected them to pick Vertigo back then, which they didn't do. And we talked about it a lot in theory and what we want to do. And back then I thought, okay, we have a good plan. The players know what we want to do. But I should have trusted more in the individual skill to win on Nuke rather than, again, what we have on paper. Because back then I was just still learning and I was still in like this mood or phase that as an analyst you work on your paper, you have to be prepared and you want to avoid unknown territory, I would say. But that was like a big mistake and a big learning phase that I took out of this, that your players are smart enough and they are skilled enough to play by the feelings without having talked about like map in theory or something.
So at that point, it was your decision to go into the Vertigo veto.
Yeah, it was me. It was HooXi and me. We were at the veto, but obviously as a coach, you have the last decision. But yeah, it was, I would take it on me because I could have said, let's go Nuke.
A little reminiscent of their recent major where the veto situation happened again and they picked Ancient instead of Inferno. Or they left
but
Ancient
I think that's really hard to say because if this JL shot, for example, doesn't happen, like this Deagle insane shots, then we are not going to talk about the veto at all. I think like people are very nitpicky if it comes to this stuff, and I think in the end they also lost on Inferno against NAVI like a few weeks ago. So yeah,
I think they'd lost twice even.
Exactly. So I wouldn't put it on the veto at all because on Ancient they were set up to win if JL doesn't have this insane round. I think like NAVI was looking really flat.
The conversation around the veto as well was about how Taz took credit for deciding to go towards that, but still people blamed HooXi as the IGL and the person who should have some responsibility in it. What did you kind of see from that conversation, both, I guess, when it comes to your Vertigo decision and also this recent one at this major?
I think it's just unfair to blame it on HooXi because obviously he can say it, but as a coach, like you have the last word, right? Because that's how the hierarchy should be, like you're over your players. And if you think it's the right decision, then you just have to take it on the chin. And people blaming HooXi for it or saying HooXi then doesn't do his job, like what is he supposed to do? Like you also don't see players going against the coach when it comes to penalty kicks in soccer or anything. Like it's his decision and it's not like obviously HooXi is standing next to me. If he If he then obviously would say, hey, I feel better on this map, then yeah, I would consider it. But in the end, it's like a coach's decision, and people saying it's HooXi fault. It's just like they have never been part of a team dynamic as well. It's not like I as a coach decide the veto myself. Like obviously we have talks about it. We have our preferences. If it doesn't go to the first, then we go to the second. And in this decision, we decided for vertigo as our first priority because we talked about it, and they probably talked about Ancient more than Infernal because of recent results or anything. And then like just people should just learn to accept it as well.
From that major result, the Blast result, you ended up having to go to Dallas pretty quickly after, and the mood in the team looked off. I was there. I saw everybody walking around a little bit down, and there's some just general struggles within the team as we left that event. Can you talk me through kind of that process and what was going on? Because there was conversations about the way that HooXi was looking and the way that Hunter was, I guess, contributing as well within the team, because I heard him calling a little bit more at that event as well, just in mid-rounds and whatnot.
Yeah, I think like the USA period, like Dallas and Washington were definitely like our lowest lows, because Petzer was also talking about it in Cologne. I think on HLTV confirmed that we openly talked to HooXi about it, that he would be removed if he doesn't improve his appearance. Like he was really down, he was super burned out, he was fully emo, and it has like a big effect on the team if your leader and IGL is going and like has his head down all the time. He was walking away from the pack, and we were having long talks to him, and we were like honestly and very transparent, telling him, hey, you are our leader, we value you highly, that's why we have this talk with you. If you don't improve it, then it's your bad, and you will be removed. And I think it was good from us as well that we were transparent, that we were telling him these things, because he realized it as well. He needed some kick in the ass, and we took those tournaments as a bit of a vacation, I would say, which you shouldn't do, but we saw that it's not going well in this time, and we needed to work on the team dynamics. So Hunter was calling a bit more as well on T sides, like he was giving input because HooXi didn't feel comfortable, because you know how it is when your leader doesn't feel good, and then when he's calling stuff he sounds different. For example, in Katowice, when he was calling, he called with like such conviction that you would follow him blindly, but then in Dallas he was like his voice was just low, everything was just down. And then I think it's also good on Hunter to help him out and to not let him suffer, and to just let him do his thing. And I think this wake-up call really helped him, because it revitalized HooXi again.
And you feel like that's something that helped a lot when it came to that Cologne one that followed right after?
Yeah, I think so, because we were just talking about him, that we appreciate him, that we know that we can win trophies with him, that he's a good IGL, no matter what like the outside says, because at this time also like outside noise got to him, which he improved a lot now. Like he doesn't give a shit anymore about what people say that are not within the team. And like everyone was just telling him that they believe in him, they don't want to change him. Like every single team member was telling him, we don't want to change you, so just work on yourself, because otherwise it's just unbearable, and we have to, but we don't want to. So it was really, really good to see like the turnaround for Cologne, which is obviously one of the most important tournaments.
Talking about HooXi as an IGL and that outside noise, there is a lot of conversation that people like to say about how he contributes to the team or what his leadership is like. But from the outside, it's really hard to see exactly what he does versus how much other players' voices are contributing to rounds, or whether it's more by committee or whatnot. Can you tell me, as someone who was a coach during this whole year, exactly what it was like with HooXi's calling, maybe the influence he has, and some of the details of that can maybe now be revealed now that we're a year out from it?
I think HooXi is really, really smart, and when it comes to calling, especially on T side, like he's reading the opponent super well, and he's like studying demos a lot, and he's also really good at tweaking our game just a little bit when we were doing tournaments. For example, if we played like group stage on the same map, we would tweak our T-side just a little bit to make it look different. Like if we would hit Inferno A, we would throw like library smokes and long smokes, but we would end up exploding short rather than wrapping A. Just little tweaks like this. He was really, really good at identifying it. That made us more unpredictable. And what was really good as well was just his commitment. Like, he is super unselfish. Like, he will always say, I swing for you first. I don't give a fuck. Like, he doesn't care about stats. He doesn't care about HLTV. He doesn't care about what it says and if we win, because when we were winning, he saw it was when he was committing, when he had people trade, and when he was giving freedom to players. Like when we had NiKo, who was like the best entry in the world, he gave him every freedom in the world, and he also shared responsibilities, because when we were with Aleksib, like most of the responsibility was on Aleksib, but HooXi kind of implemented the system that every player has 20% responsibility on the T side. So most of the times the lurk players are pretty quiet, but with him, also Justin had to talk a lot, like how many smokes are they using on A in a slow default, like are they using 2 or 3 smokes instantly? Then our A lurk, like Justin, had the responsibility of calling the team back, and we were following Justin's call, because obviously HooXi can't see everything that's happening on the map when he's playing towards banana. So that was like a really good thing that he implemented, that everyone had the responsibility to call the team back if he saw a certain thing, and also helping with openings, like if he saw that they were chain smoking overpass monster, for example, that we could explode later on, and then HooXi would like adjust his game plan accordingly, where he would maybe play it a bit different from his game plan, but he was listening a lot to input from his lurks as well, and yeah, like that made us, I think, really, really good.
One of the criticisms for him has been that he had Mono C, he had NiKo, he had Hunter, who used to be in much better form than he is now, but as a whole, this lineup was star-studded, but the titles that you guys won were big. They were Kato and Cologne, but outside of that, not being able to be like a consistent number one, win every title team, that's one of the big things that people have held against him for his leadership. Yeah. Can you tell me what you saw about that and from the conversations that you've seen?
I think like back then our lows were just too low. Like we didn't have a bottom floor that we needed to win against the teams that we needed to, like against some top 20, top 30 team we needed to win even if we played bad, but we didn't really have like that floor that they have right now. I think right now they improved it really well. Like they are pretty consistent, even though they are not the best individually right now, but they found the system that made it work for them. I don't know if it's CT or T only or what it is, but back when we were playing, like when we were losing, we started to make too many individual decisions. We didn't trust the calls sometimes. We wanted to do things, and especially on T side, we wanted to close the game too fast. Like when we had a big lead, we wanted to rush things. We wanted to play fast rather than letting the opponent get back into the game and showing us that they can actually win. But we were gifting away a lot of big leads and by trying to rush things, and that was a lot of stuff that we talked about. And yeah, just that our lowest low was just so incredibly low that we could honestly lose against any team on any given day if we didn't show up individually.
When you say something like we wanted to rush, we wanted to do these faster things to close out games, is that attributed to the whole team, or is that kind of HooXi's calling would change based on those kind of situations?
I think it was more of HooXi's calling, because afterwards a lot of times he was saying, let's play more defaults on T-side when we have a big lead, let's get us into XVX situations, because we always said if we get into a 3v3, we are the best team in the world, because then we most likely have NiKo, Hunter and Ilya alive. And those 3 guys, I would say, win 80% of their 3v3s against any team on any given day. But sometimes we were just trying to play too fast. We were trying to enter runs too fast. We didn't play defaults. We played very structured and didn't allow individuals to shine, like didn't give individuals time to play the map or to play clutches. And yeah, that was just a lot on the calling. But that's also on me, because back then I also wasn't the best at taking timeouts when I should have. Like when you have a big lead, sometimes it's just enough to take a timeout and say, okay, let's breathe. Remember what we talked about, close it out slowly, don't rush things. So it's also on me that I left HooXi kind of alone sometimes.
Were you still doing analyst work during this point while you were the coach?
Yeah, I was alone. I was doing everything on my own.
One of the things that HooXi mentioned in the interview we did with him, I think shortly after you left the team, was that you had some personality traits that didn't really fit in with coaching, that you didn't, like, you weren't the person who would tell people that they weren't doing good enough or that they weren't putting their effort in. Is that something that resonates with you looking back, especially based on some of what you've just said?
Yeah, of course. Like I was always the assistant coach, and as an assistant coach, you're always kind of the good guy, right? Like the coach is the bad guy, and then the players come to you and they're like, "Hey, yeah, what do you think?" Blah blah. And I always had like a really, really, really good relationship with NiKo and Hunter. Like we would even be on vacation, like after Abu Dhabi and Dubai together and stuff like this. So we always had like a really good friendship out. And then me myself, I'm just not the type of guy who has too much authority, right? I'm 180, 70 kilos. So, if a task is standing by you, he just has more authority as well. And I was always like the good guy, and it's like just not a personal trait for me. And G2 also, like, they tried to change me with mental guys, they were saying, hey, change this, change that, but it's really, really hard to try and change your personality. But like during this year, I think, like he also said it, like, I think I was the perfect fit for them because they needed to get back together, they needed to gel together, but then I also realized they need something different now. So that's also why I took a step back. Like I saw, okay, they need like more consistency, and you only get consistency by being harsh, by in practice, like taking 10 pauses and saying, I don't like this, I don't like that, we said this. Like this is how you get consistency. And with me, like I was really, really good again at like preparing games, doing game plans, at helping individuals by being a friendly guy and by guiding them in the right direction. But I will never be the type of guy who will be mean, who will be the asshole, like it's just not me, and I never wanted to be. It's just not my trait, and I think that's also my personality, and I don't want to change my personality, and I cannot change the personality, but he's definitely right, and that's why I think like Tas is a better fit right now.
While you're an analyst and a coach for the team throughout 2023, I guess, when you were making these game plans, how do you feel like it changed based on you being a coach? Do you think that had a different influence in the way that you were planning for games or the way that the game plans would be executed, since you were now directly in the server and had a voice?
I honestly didn't change too much because HooXi and me always had like pretty much the same view on the game, but I personally was involving players a lot more. Like on Ancient CT side, I was watching demos together with Hunter, how he wanted to play mid because mid on Ancient is super important. Whereas back in the days, it would be a lot of the times just the coach saying how we would play. But I would involve Hunter a lot more on Inferno City side. I would watch a lot more together with NiKo because how important Banana is. And my main focus was always on CT side, whereas HooXi was focusing fully on T side. So that he was really prepared on T side because he's a guy who needs to be prepared. And if he's prepared, he's on his best. So I was like really, really focused on having us perform well on CT side and trying to help HooXi with T side. But it's hard if you are a coach and you are alone, you don't have an assistant that you have to watch yourself, you have to improve individuals, then you have to create a game plan. Like it can get very overwhelming, especially if you are like me. Like I had to learn how to become a coach at the same time, right? Because I'm obviously not a good coach, but I was trying my best and I think it worked out fine in the end.
When you were talking about the impact of the way HooXi was calling and the way that the rush to finish games would kind of change based on him, do you feel like that's something that they've solved now? And do you feel like the conversation back then was justified in putting a bit of the blame on him?
Yeah, for sure. Like it's not like bad blame, right? Like it was just good good feedback because we saw if he played slower that it worked out really well, and he also recognized it himself. And I think now you can see that they play it a lot more systematic towards the end of games. Like they are not like, sometimes they are giving still away big leads, but it's not like crazy like we did back in the times where we got comebacked a lot of times and we were just playing with a lot of flaws. Like nowadays it's more ironed out, and I think you can see that they have more consistency by placing top 4 a lot more than we did, for example, in the past.
Touching on the players, as it's now been a good amount of time that you had worked with them, how did you see the dynamic between, let's say, NiKo and Monesi unfold? Because you said that he was working really close with him when he first joined. And obviously when you watch them on the player cams and whatnot, they're usually interacting a lot. So how did you see that dynamic over the years that they played together?
Honestly, I think that Monesi is still taking NiKo as the biggest role model, and they're doing a lot of stuff outside of the game as well, and like going out shopping, going out to eat, going out to do this together. Like they have like this big and small brother kind of vibe, and it just helps you so much if you have a good connection outside of the game, because then again you want to learn more from each other. And NiKo is always the kind of guy who is instantly correcting mistakes. Like in scrims, he would instantly write to Ilya, hey, this happened, we did this bad, let's improve it by doing this. But always in a good way, like never flaming, always in a good way with good constructive criticism. And you can see how much it helped Ilya improve. And I think he appreciates it a lot. And that's why like this dynamic will always be super important to the team.
For Monesi specifically, you talked earlier about how his personal development went over the years and how he started taking more initiative. In CS2, we've seen him step up a level even past that. What do you think has changed for him, and what have you seen from him based on that?
I think right now he also sees that he has to make a difference, because without him, the team is like not winning too much if he doesn't have the biggest game. But he's finally realizing it as well, which is a good thing, that he needs to do moves. He needs to be very versatile. Like on CT side, you can see it, like he's flying all over the map. If he's shooting somewhere, he's never really staying in this place. He always has different status, like he evolved to the next level. And I think he just realized how important he is to the team and how important a good AWP is. Like you can also see it with Wonderful. Like I think he's also realizing how important it is for a guy like him to take over responsibility and to take like the next step and to take risks. And I think that's also like the future of ops. Like you will never win anything with an op that is very passive and very readable. And Ilya saw it, and he just never let go.
You said that the team are struggling if he's not stepping up to that level, which is true. We've had this period where Hunter's level has dropped off significantly from the level he used to play at, and even NiKo's level went down a bit and is now coming back up. What have you witnessed from that? Because obviously there was Sydney last year and a couple of events at the end of the year that you were there for, but now we've seen a little bit more develop over the course of the start of the year. So what have you seen during just that together?
I think it's just really hard for players who have played on the top in CSGO. And NiKo also told me that it's hard for him because, for example, the smoke nade thing changed the whole dynamic. Like the way he was like playing banana in CSGO didn't work at all in CS2, and he had to adjust to the new game. Like the way they take fights, like NiKo a lot of times wanted to take good fights. He was clearing every angle. It's just not something that works in CS2, right? Like if you strafe, you just always have the advantage, unfortunately. That's why Donk is working out so well, and he's just having to transition to a new game from experience that he had 10 years ago. So I think like you need to give them more time, because they were just so dominant in CSGO, and they still tried to implement it in CS2, but they realized now after 2-3 months, okay, it's not working too much. And now they have to reinvent themselves again. So it's like really hard to do it instantly. You can see it with NiKo, it's working really well sometimes, but not so well other times. But like I know that they're putting in tons of work, so I don't know why it wouldn't work out in the future. But obviously they expect a lot more than just top 4 all the time.
You say NiKo, for example, had to change the way that he approached playing banana. Can you delve into that a little bit more as an example of the kind of things that CS2's influenced from your analyst perspective?
I mean, just if you compare it to CSGO, like you knew when the banana smokes would fade and what the next move of a CT would be, right? Because he always had really good reads. depending on what utility they throw. But nowadays, they just nade open the smoke flash and you stand there with your pants down. Whereas in CSGO, you could stand behind the smoke, watch your mates, what utility they have, and could make up a plan during those 18 seconds that the smoke is up. Whereas nowadays, you have to be ready all the time for something weird to happen, for people to flash through, to nade open, and it's just gotten a lot more unpredictable because NiKo was always a calculated guy. Like, he knew very well what was going on after this smoke, after this flash, whereas now, as I said, it's just more unpredictable and it's hard for him to just transition instantly from like one extreme to the other extreme, but I think he's doing decently well right now.
Another big change a little bit before you left, but basically around the same time, was the departure of JKS and the addition of nexa. There was a lot of conversation about how JKS's voice on the team wasn't enough, or he didn't communicate enough. Can you tell me a little about that from your perspective and what you saw then, since there was a lot of questions about why that change happened, and then with nexa coming in and results not coming to the team immediately, there's been a lot of criticism of the decision. So just in general about that.
I mean, Justin is just the type of guy who is obviously more quiet, but sometimes you just needed to pull everything out of him, where he wouldn't like step up and say things he didn't like, for example. And it's just hard in a team dynamic where you travel so much and you have to be transparent to each other. And if you hit like a stopgap at some points, and then you don't really improve as a team if not everyone is speaking up, if not everyone is giving their opinion. And yeah, what we talked about as well, I think Petter said it, where he would get like visibly frustrated on camera as well, and a player like Hunter gets easily affected by stuff like this. So yeah, it's just like a team thing where we were thinking that we hit the ceiling and we couldn't go further, so we needed to make a change, and the change was based on having better communication from like a look and just everything that they already said.
Did you play a part in that decision?
No, not really. I didn't have too much input because I also knew that I'm going to leave, and no, not really.
Looking back on it in hindsight, do you feel like it was the right decision for the team?
Yeah, for the team at the moment it was the right decision, I would say. But obviously a player like JKS, it's always a gamble to replace because he's really, really good at shooting. But with all the conditions that we had and what we needed as a team, I think it was the correct decision.
Their results after, especially coming into this year, have actually been pretty decent, especially if you look at their results table. It's one of the strongest starts of the year they've had in quite a while, actually, in terms of, even though titles haven't been won, they did get quarterfinals at the Major, quarterfinals in Chengdu. So for that to start turning around, what do you think the team, what do you think is lacking to actually get them over the line now, with nexa starting to fit in a little bit more, but them still having issues with Hunter's level and NiKo starting to return to form, but still not quite there?
Yeah. I think they just need to see again and get this feeling of confidence back, because this game is like all about confidence, especially now in CS2, even in CSGO, but even more so now. But if you never really play to your level that you have, especially for Hunter or nexa, if you don't have this confidence, then it's really hard to get back. But I think all they need is to just win one tournament, even if it's like a smaller tournament, if it's EPL or something, and finding back the groove, because I think on T side and CT side they're actually playing really good Counter-Strike. Like T side, I would say like they are calling like top 3 T sides, and CT side you always have Modesty and NiKo who will win you rounds. And as soon as nexa is stepping up, then NiKo also has a lot more trust in him, and it will free up the whole CT side again, and everything is going to change. They just need what we had back then, where we win one title, and it will flow freely, I would say.
I know it might be hard to tell from the outside now that you're not actually coaching, but where do you feel like Hunter's struggles are coming from? What do you think is some of the issues he might be facing right now?
I think he's also playing a lot of unthankful positions, like Anubis. He's playing around cave. It's a lot of positions where you go in first or you get bombarded with utility, like ancient and mid and all this stuff. You have to go through smokes, you have to take unfavorable duels. And I think he's just also struggling a bit with this whole new CS2 meta of like nailing open smokes, and he's not the type of guy who likes to hard swing on you. Like he didn't really do it in CSGO, and it's just something that you need to do in CS2. You need to swing, you need to be the first guy taking the gunfights, and you can't always take duels that are in your favor. You need to take unfavorable duels and try to win them out. I think he just has to accept the fact that it's not being played like it is in CSGO, and you can see like when he has a good game, especially in pistols, like if he gets good confidence doing it, then he will shine in the whole game. So again, it's like, it sounds stupid, but it's a lot of confidence.
As this team now moves on without you, you're, as you said, retired. You said the job took a big toll on you with all the travel. You lost your passion for it. Was that a lot linked to just the amount of travel you had to do? Or is it, do you think if you'd continued winning titles regularly, do you think that would still have kept you in for a little longer?
I mean, I was thinking about the same thing, but like winning stuff just like kind of puts a band-aid on the bad things, right? Because you get like this dopamine, you get a lot of those happy feelings when you win titles. But when I was laying in bed, sometimes I was like, do I really want this? And then it got back to no a lot often, then it got back to yes. So also contributed to the fact that basically all my career, I was analyzing CSGO, like I was really good at CSGO, analyzing, finding tendencies, and I had also a lot of issues adapting to CS2, like finding new stuff, finding meta stuff, finding like new tricks that you do with the smoke, or now with the smoke molly exploit, kind of where you can step in between. Like I'm not really a fan of using this stuff or building your game plan around, so to say, random stuff, you know. I was also very structured, always focused on what smokes they used, what utility they throw. And now it got a lot more random, and it kind of took away the fun for me, because you can win by doing random stuff, and that's not how good CS is played for me.
With you being retired now, are you completely out of esports, or are you just not looking to travel for events and whatnot anymore?
No, I'm still involved. I also do sometimes some watch parties together with Sonics for German streams. Like we were casting the Major, we were doing IM Chengdu. Like I still love the game and I still like to watch it, but all the stress of having to perform, of being part of a tier 1 team, is just nothing that I envy anymore, and all the traveling. But I will also definitely go to Cologne in the summer and watch it. So I obviously still love the game, but I don't love it in a professional way.
As we reach the end of this, is there anything that you want to leave us with? What's next for you, or any parting words about your time in G2 or the scene as a whole?
I just want to also say thank you, because I only got like really, really good feedback on my work whenever we posted something, or even when we did bad. Like people always had trust in me, even though I was like a nobody. Also to G2 a big thank you, because they trusted basically a random analyst with being the head coach for like a top 3 team, which is not understandable, like or not too reasonable, because they also could have just gotten a coach that obviously has experience. But they trusted me, which I'm thankful for, and I'm very thankful and hope that I was able to give back to everyone. And also, obviously, again, a big thank you to everyone who made Cologne to what it was, because like that was a lifetime experience for me. Having like people shout your name in a full arena is crazy to me, and it will always be surreal. And I bookmarked every video where I heard it so I can rewatch it. And just honestly, also thank you to Counter-Strike, because I got to travel almost every place in the world that I wanted to see. And also big thank you to NiKo and Hunter, who are still some of my best friends nowadays. Even like we are still talking. They always helped me in my career. They gave me the best feedback ever. Like Hunter and NiKo always talk to me. I know that now, even if I have a problem, I can talk to them. Like, I'm really thankful to those two guys that I met them and that they took me up to another level, both on a human basis but also on a professional level. And I think they deserve a lot of praise for the trophies that we won.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, man.
Thank you.